The loud splash of children playing in the glowing blue water suddenly faded into uncomfortable silence. The moment Harold stepped through the pool gate carrying nothing but a faded towel over his shoulder and an old paperback tucked beneath his arm. Most people in the neighborhood barely noticed him anymore because he moved slowly, spoke softly, and kept to himself. But Sandra, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, noticed everything. She stood from her chair near the entrance, like she'd been waiting all afternoon for this exact moment, and before Harold could even reach the water, she blocked his path in front of dozens of staring families, accusing him of trespassing and demanding proof that he belonged there, while children stopped swimming and parents awkwardly looked away. Harold never raised his voice, never argued, and never defended himself, which somehow made Sandra even louder, and what happened next would leave the entire town speechless. Harold Bennett had lived in the Willow Creek neighborhood longer than almost anyone else. But over the years, the community around him had changed. Young families replaced older residents, luxury renovations spread through the streets, and Sandra Collins slowly turned the Homeowners Association into her personal kingdom. She walked around carrying violation notices like trophies, reporting people for small things like garden decorations, faded curtains, and garbage cans left outside too long. But Harold was different because he never reacted to her harassment every afternoon around sunset. He quietly walked to the community pool, sat beside the deep end, and read his old novels while teenagers splashed nearby and exhausted parents cooled off after work. Some neighbors admired him because he always greeted everyone with a calm smile while others barely acknowledged his existence. Sandra, however, seemed obsessed with him. She complained that he lowered the image of the neighborhood because of his old truck-worn clothes and quiet habits. And during the weeks before the incident, several residents noticed her whispering to pool staff, asking questions about Harold that nobody understood at the time. 3 days before the confrontation, Sandra placed new security signs around the pool, warning residents that trespassers would be prosecuted, and she proudly announced stricter enforcement rules during the monthly HOA meeting, even though nobody remembered there ever being problems before. Harold attended that meeting sitting quietly near the back, while Sandra spoke for nearly an hour about protecting property values and maintaining standards every few minutes. Her eyes drifted toward Harold like she was building toward something bigger. But she never directly mentioned him. Then, on the afternoon everything exploded. The neighborhood pool was packed because of a local heat wave. Children crowded the shallow end, music played softly from portable speakers, and parents filled every lounge chair. Harold arrived later than usual, walking carefully with a slight limp caused by an old injury. Nobody asked about Sandra, immediately stood up from her seat near the gate and intercepted him before he could enter. She demanded his resident identification card. Even though most people entered freely without showing anything, Harold calmly explained he had forgotten it at home. But Sandra smiled coldly and accused him of sneaking into the community illegally. Some residents nervously watched, while others quietly pulled out their phones, sensing something ugly was unfolding. Sandra escalated the situation with shocking confidence, raising her voice loud enough for the entire pool area to hear. She claimed Harold had been using community facilities without authorization for months and threatened to call the police if he refused to leave immediately. Harold remained calm despite the growing humiliation washing over him like cold rain under the burning summer sun. Children stared openly while several teenagers began recording the confrontation. Sandra stepped closer, invading Harold's personal space and pointing toward the exit gate like she was removing a criminal from private property. One father quietly told Sandra to relax, but she snapped back that rules mattered and weak enforcement destroyed neighborhoods. Harold slowly reached into his pocket, searching for something before quietly admitting his resident card was still sitting on his kitchen table. Sandra seized on the moment, triumphantly announcing that she finally caught him lying, and within minutes she called local security officers who arrived awkwardly, unsure why an elderly man holding a paperback novel was being treated like a dangerous intruder. Even the guards looked uncomfortable, but Sandra continued pushing, insisting Harold should be permanently banned from community property. Then something strange happened. Harold looked past the crowd toward the parking lot and, For the first time all afternoon, a faint expression crossed his face, almost like recognition, because a black town vehicle had just pulled into the parking area, and the driver stepping out was someone Sandra clearly did not expect to see. Mayor Daniel Reeves walked through the pool gate wearing casual clothes after finishing a town ceremony nearby, and the moment his eyes landed on Harold, his entire expression changed. The tension vanished from his face, and he crossed the crowded pool deck without hesitation before wrapping Harold in a warm, emotional hug. The entire crowd froze in disbelief. Sandra looked completely stunned while the mayor held Harold's shoulders and asked why nobody had called him sooner. Then Mayor Reeves turned toward the confused residents and quietly revealed something that instantly changed the entire atmosphere. 20 years earlier, before most of the current neighborhood even existed, Willow Creek had suffered a catastrophic flood during a violent storm, and while emergency crews struggled to reach trapped families, Harold had personally driven rescue boats through rising waters all night, saving dozens of residents, including Mayor Reeves' younger sister who had been trapped inside a collapsing house. Suddenly, the quiet old man everyone ignored no longer looked ordinary at all. The silence around the pool became painfully heavy as neighbors slowly processed what they had just heard. Several older residents began recognizing Harold and whispering memories they had not spoken about in years. One woman near the fence suddenly covered her mouth, realizing Harold had once carried her son through floodwaters to safety, while Sandra stood completely motionless, unable to regain control of the situation. Teenagers who recorded the confrontation continued filming as Mayor Reeves calmly questioned why a local hero had been publicly humiliated over a missing identification card. Pool staff nervously admitted Sandra personally ordered stricter enforcement rules only days earlier, and several residents immediately began confronting her about years of bullying behavior. Complaints flooded social media that same evening after videos from the pool spread across town, and within 48 hours, emergency HOA meetings were scheduled while angry homeowners demanded Sandra's resignation. Her authority collapsed almost overnight because for the first time, the neighborhood saw her clearly, without fear or excuses, hiding behind her power. A week later, Harold returned to the community pool just before sunset carrying the same faded towel and old paperback novel. But this time, something felt completely different. Neighbors greeted him warmly, children waved from the water, and families invited him to sit. Beside them, Sandra was nowhere to be seen. After resigning from the Homeowners Association under massive public pressure, Mayor Reeves later arranged for Harold to receive a town honor, recognizing his bravery during the historic flood. Though Harold accepted the award quietly without speeches or attention because he never wanted recognition, he only wanted peace. As the evening sun reflected across the calm blue water, Harold finally sat beside the deep end, opened his book, and for the first time in years, nobody tried to make him feel unwelcome again. If you enjoyed this emotional story, filled with justice, shocking twists, and unforgettable moments, make sure to subscribe to QZ Stories for more powerful cinematic videos that keep you hooked until the very end. Share this story with friends and family who love dramatic revenge stories, emotional reveals, and satisfying endings, because your support helps QZ Stories bring even more incredible stories to life.